The whistle of the approaching train pierced the tranquil Montana afternoon, as Sarah Calloway clutched her weathered carpetbag tighter, feeling every bit of her 33 years. The silver strands that had begun appearing in her dark brown hair 3 years prior now framed her face like delicate spider's silk, catching the sunlight as she nervously patted her carefully pinned bun. This journey to Hawthorne, Montana had consumed her last pennies and her final reserves of hope. April 1883 had arrived with the promise of new beginnings. After burying both her parents within 6 months of each other back in Boston, Sarah had found herself alone, unmarried, and facing destitution. The advertisement in the matrimonial news had seemed like divine providence. Successful cattle rancher seeks bride of good character and domestic skill. Passage paid. Thomas Fletcher's 3 letters had been courteous if somewhat reserved, and his daguerreotype showed a handsome man of approximately 40 with kind eyes and a strong jaw. He'd written that Hawthorne was growing rapidly since the Northern Pacific Railroad had connected it to the eastern states 2 years prior. The train slowed with a screech of metal wheels against the tracks, jolting Sarah from her reverie. She smoothed the wrinkles from her best blue traveling dress, a garment already 5 years out of fashion, and gathered her courage along with her belongings. Hawthorne Station, called the conductor as the train lurched to a complete stop. Sarah joined the trickle of passengers disembarking onto the wooden platform. The April air carried a chill that penetrated her woolen coat, and she scanned the small gathering of people anxiously. Thomas Fletcher had promised to meet her, recognizing her from the small photograph she had sent with her letters. A tall man in a worn leather coat and wide-brimmed hat stepped forward, his weathered face creasing into a frown as his eyes settled on her. "Miss Calloway?" he asked, his voice deep and gravelly. Sarah nodded, attempting a smile. "Mr. Fletcher, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, sir." The man, Thomas Fletcher, didn't return her smile. His gaze drifted to her hair, lingered there for an uncomfortable moment, then dropped to the dusty planks of the platform. "You didn't mention your condition in your letters," he said stiffly. Sarah's hand instinctively rose to her hair. "My condition? Your hair, madam, it's gray." He gestured awkwardly. "You can't be more than 35, yet you're already turning." Heat rose to Sarah's cheeks. "I'm 33, Mr. Fletcher. The gray began after my mother's illness. The doctor said sometimes grief can—" "I'm sorry, Miss Calloway," Thomas interrupted, shaking his head. "This won't work. I need a young wife, someone who can bear children for many years to come, someone healthy." The words struck Sarah like physical blows. "But sir, I am healthy. My mother lived to 70, and the appearance of age suggests otherwise," Thomas said firmly, backing away. "I've made arrangements for you at the boarding house for tonight. Mrs. Winters is expecting you. Tomorrow, I'll purchase your ticket back east." "But I have nothing to return to," Sarah whispered, fighting tears. Thomas Fletcher touched the brim of his hat. "I'm sorry for your troubles, madam, but I cannot be responsible for them. Good day." He turned and strode away, leaving Sarah alone on the platform as other passengers reunited with loved ones or dispersed into the town. She blinked rapidly, willing the tears not to fall as she stood rooted to the spot, her carpetbag suddenly impossibly heavy in her trembling hand. "First time in Hawthorne?" a voice asked from behind. Sarah turned to find a man leading a pair of horses. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders beneath a worn denim shirt. His face was partially obscured by several days' growth of beard, but his eyes were a striking blue beneath the brim of his dust-covered hat. Sarah's voice faltered. "Yes, first and last, it seems." The stranger's expression softened as he took in her obvious distress. "Town's not much, but it doesn't usually reduce folks to tears within 5 minutes of arrival. Despite everything, Sarah found herself offering a watery smile. "It's not the town, sir, it's my circumstances." He nodded thoughtfully. "Circumstances can be mighty troublesome out west." He extended a calloused hand. "Tate Forrester. I run the Silver Creek Ranch about 10 miles outside town." "Sarah Calloway," she replied, briefly touching his hand. I was meant to meet my fiancé, but he's decided I'm not suitable." Tate frowned. "Not suitable? You mean Thomas Fletcher?" Sarah's eyes widened. "You know him?" "Everybody knows everybody round these parts," Tate said. "Fletcher's place neighbors mine to the south." "What's his objection, if you don't mind my asking?" Sarah hesitated, then gestured to her hair with a bitter smile. "Apparently, silver threads disqualify me from being a proper wife." Tate Forrester's eyes moved to her hair, then back to her face. For a long moment, he studied her without speaking. "Fletcher always was a fool," he finally said. "Silver's always been more valuable than gold in these parts, madam." The unexpected compliment brought warmth to Sarah's cheeks. "You're kind, Mr. Forrester, but it doesn't change my situation. I've come all this way for nothing, and now I have nowhere to go." "You mentioned Mrs. Winter's boarding house." "Yes, but only for tonight. After that." Sarah swallowed hard. Tate adjusted his hat, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Mrs. Winters runs a fine establishment. My ranch hand's wife helps her with cooking and cleaning. They might know of work in town if you're of a mind to stay." "Stay? In Hawthorne?" The idea hadn't occurred to Sarah. "Why not, unless you've got pressing business back east?" "No," Sarah admitted. "There's nothing for me there. But I know no one here, and my funds are nearly depleted." Tate glanced at the fading afternoon light. "Let's get you settled at Mrs. Winters first. Tomorrow's soon enough to worry about what comes next." He reached for her carpetbag. "May I?" Sarah hesitated before relinquishing her bag. "Thank you, Mr. Forrester." "Just Tate, madam. We don't stand on ceremony much out here." As they walked toward the boarding house, Sarah couldn't help but notice the curious glances from townsfolk. A woman alone in the West was unusual, and she felt conspicuous in her Eastern clothing. "Don't mind them," Tate said quietly, noticing her discomfort. "New faces are rare enough to cause a stir, especially ones as—" He stopped abruptly. "As what, Mr. Forrester?" Sarah asked. He cleared his throat. "As refined as yours, Miss Calloway." The boarding house proved to be a 2-story clapboard structure with green shutters and a wide front porch. Mrs. Winters, a robust woman with iron-gray hair scraped back into a severe bun, greeted them at the door. "You must be Miss Calloway," she said briskly. "Mr. Fletcher sent word you'd be needing accommodations." Her shrewd eyes took in Sarah's appearance, then shifted to Tate. "Forrester, surprised to see you in town midweek." "Just being neighborly, Mrs. Winters," Tate replied. "Miss Calloway had no one to show her to your establishment." Mrs. Winters made a non-committal sound. "Well, come in then. Supper's at 6 sharp. Don't be late or you'll go hungry till breakfast." Sarah followed the older woman inside, glancing back at Tate. "Thank you again, Mr. Forrester." He tipped his hat. "My pleasure, Miss Calloway. Perhaps I'll see you tomorrow." Mrs. Winters showed Sarah to a small but clean room on the second floor. Washrooms down the hall. No gentlemen callers past 8 o'clock. She fixed Sarah with a stern look. "Mr. Fletcher explained your situation. You'll not be the first mail-order bride to be sent packing, though most don't even make it to town before being rejected." "I suppose that should be comforting," Sarah murmured. Mrs. Winters' expression softened slightly. "There's worse things than being a woman alone in Hawthorne. We've got a church, a school, and more women than you might expect. The territory's been settled long enough that we've got civilization, of a sort." "You know if there might be employment opportunities?" Sarah asked. I'm educated. I was a governess in Boston before my parents' illnesses, and I'm capable with household duties. Mrs. Winters considered this. The school teacher's expecting a baby come summer. She'll need a replacement, temporary at least. And Widow Johnson at the Mercantile was saying just yesterday she needs help with inventory and correspondence. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. I would be grateful for an introduction to either of them. I'll see what I can do, Mrs. Winters said. Rest now. You look dead on your feet. Alone in the small room, Sarah finally allowed herself to cry quietly, releasing the accumulated disappointment and humiliation of the day. When the tears finally subsided, she washed her face in the basin of cold water and changed into her nightgown. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she contemplated her uncertain future in this strange town. Morning arrived with the clatter of dishes downstairs and sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. Sarah dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a moss-green wool with minimal adornment, and pinned her hair into a neat chignon. She hesitated, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. The silver strands were most noticeable at her temples, creating distinctive streaks against her dark brown hair. For a moment, she considered trying to arrange her hair to hide them, then straightened her shoulders. If she was to make a new life in Hawthorne, it would be as herself, gray hair and all. Breakfast was a simple affair of flapjacks, bacon, and strong coffee. Mrs. Winters introduced Sarah to the other boarders, a young man who clerked at the bank, an elderly widow, and a traveling salesman passing through town. The conversation was polite but curious, and Sarah found herself repeatedly explaining her presence without mentioning Thomas Fletcher's rejection. After breakfast, Mrs. Winters approached with her bonnet already tied. I'm heading to the Mercantile. You're welcome to accompany me and meet Widow Johnson. I'd appreciate that very much, Sarah said, grateful for the older woman's efficiency. Hawthorne revealed itself to be larger than Sarah's first impression had suggested. The main street boasted a bank, the Mercantile, a telegraph office, 2 saloons, a hotel, and various other businesses. People nodded greetings as they passed, some openly curious about the newcomer. Town's grown considerably since the railroad came through, Mrs. Winters explained. We're expecting to double in size within 5 years. Already got folks talking about incorporation and a proper town council. The Mercantile was busy with morning customers when they arrived. Widow Johnson proved to be a sharp-eyed woman of about 50 with an impressive command of her inventory and customers. So you're looking for work? She asked Sarah directly after Mrs. Winters made the introductions. Can you cipher, read handwriting, keep ledgers? Yes to all, Sarah replied. I managed my father's household accounts for years, and I've experience teaching mathematics to children. Widow Johnson nodded approvingly. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and the business has grown too large for me to manage alone. I've been sending away to Denver for supplies, but the correspondence is becoming burdensome. I would be delighted to assist with that, Sarah said. $4 a week to start, Widow Johnson stated. 6 days, sunup to sundown with a break for midday meal. Sundays off for church, of course. It wasn't a generous wage, but it would cover her room and board at Mrs. Winters with a small amount left over. When would you like me to begin? No time like the present, the widow said briskly. You can start by organizing the new shipment of fabric that came in yesterday. By midday, Sarah's back ached from measuring and folding bolts of calico, gingham, and muslin, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. Widow Johnson proved to be a fair employer if exacting in her standards, and the steady stream of customers provided distraction from Sarah's troubles. She was arranging a display of buttons when the bell above the door jangled and Tate Forrester stepped inside. He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair with just a touch of silver at the temples. Their eyes met, and he smiled, crossing the store to where she stood. "Miss Calloway, it seems you've found your footing already, Mr. Forrester." "Yes, Mrs. Winters was kind enough to introduce me to Mrs. Johnson. Today is my first day." Tate nodded approvingly. "Elizabeth Johnson runs the finest establishment in town. You couldn't have found a better position." "Are you here to shop, Mr. Forrester, or just to take up space in my store?" Widow Johnson called from behind the counter, though her tone held no real annoyance. "Shopping, madam," Tate replied. "Need supplies for the ranch, and Miguel's wife asked for thread and needles." As Tate collected his items, Sarah noticed several women entering the store casting interested glances his way. One, a pretty blonde in an expensive-looking dress, approached directly. "Tate Forrester, what a pleasant surprise," she said, her voice carrying a slight southern accent. "I was just telling Father how we haven't seen you at Sunday services in weeks." "Miss Harriet," Tate acknowledged with a polite nod. "The spring calving keeps me busy at the ranch." "Surely you could spare an hour for the Lord," she chided playfully, then turned her attention to Sarah. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Harriet Palmer. My father owns the bank." "Sarah Calloway," Sarah replied. "I've just started working for Mrs. Johnson." Harriet's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, I hadn't realized Elizabeth was hiring. How fortunate for you to find employment so quickly." The subtle condescension in her tone was unmistakable. Before Sarah could respond, Tate spoke up. "Miss Calloway comes highly recommended from Boston. Hawthorne's lucky to have someone of her caliber join our community." Sarah felt a rush of gratitude for his defense, especially as she noticed the flash of displeasure cross Harriet's face. "How interesting," Harriet said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Well, I must select some ribbon for my new bonnet. Pleasure meeting you, Miss Calloway." "Tate, do come to Sunday dinner sometime. Father always enjoys your company." As Harriet moved away, Tate shook his head slightly. "Don't mind Harriet. She's been setting her cap for every eligible bachelor within 50 miles since she returned from finishing school in St. Louis." "Including you, it seems," Sarah observed. A wry smile crossed his face. "Bank owner's daughter and a cattle rancher would make a sensible match, according to town gossip, but I've never put much stock in doing things just because they're sensible." There was something in his direct gaze that made Sarah's cheeks warm. She busied herself rearranging the button display. "Will that be all for your purchases, Mr. Forrester?" "Actually," he said, lowering his voice, "I was wondering if you might join me for supper at the hotel restaurant this evening. They serve a decent meal and we could discuss possibilities." "Possibilities?" Sarah repeated. "For your future here in Hawthorne," Tate clarified, though something in his expression suggested there might be more to his invitation. Propriety dictated she should decline. She barely knew this man, and dining alone with him would certainly set tongues wagging. Yet there was something about Tate Forrester, a steadiness, a quiet confidence that inspired trust. "Thank you, Mr. Forrester. I would be pleased to join you, provided Mrs. Winters doesn't object to my evening arrangements." His smile broadened. "Excellent. I'll call for you at 6 if that suits." After Tate left, Widow Johnson approached with a knowing look. "Tate Forrester's a good man, one of the few in these parts who built his ranch honestly without stepping on others to get ahead." "We're just having supper," Sarah said quickly. "He's been kind to a stranger, nothing more." Widow Johnson made a non-committal sound. "Kindness is a rare enough quality these days. Now, let me show you how I keep the ledgers." The remainder of the day passed quickly as Sarah learned the mercantile systems. By closing time, she felt reasonably confident in her new duties, and more importantly secure in the knowledge that she would not be returning east in disgrace. Mrs. Winters raised no objections to Sarah's dinner plans, though she did insist that Sarah return by 9 o'clock. "Respectable establishments close by then anyway," she said firmly. Sarah changed into her best dress, a navy blue silk with modest lace at the collar and cuffs, and repinned her hair, this time allowing the silver strands to show prominently. If Thomas Fletcher considered them a flaw, she would wear them as a badge of honor. Tate arrived precisely at 6, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt under his usual leather vest. His eyes widened appreciatively as Sarah descended the stairs. "Miss Calloway, you look lovely," he said, offering his arm. "Thank you, Mr. Forrester. You clean up rather well yourself," she replied, surprising herself with the boldness of her comment. His laugh was warm and genuine as he escorted her outside. "Had to make an effort. It's not often I have the pleasure of dining with a lady of quality." The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Hawthorne, with white tablecloths and actual glass windows overlooking the main street. Sarah noticed several patrons glancing their way as they were seated, including Harriet Palmer, who was dining with an older gentleman Sarah presumed to be her father. "I believe we're causing a stir," Sarah murmured as Tate held her chair. "Small towns thrive on gossip," he replied unconcernedly. "Gives folks something to discuss, besides the weather and cattle prices." Their conversation flowed easily as they dined on surprisingly good roast beef and potatoes. Tate spoke of his ranch, 5,000 acres with a growing herd of cattle, and a reputation for quality that had buyers coming from as far as Chicago. Sarah shared stories of her life in Boston, her years as a governess, and the series of misfortunes that had led her to become a mail-order bride. "My parents' illnesses depleted our savings," she explained. "Father was a professor of literature, comfortable but not wealthy. After their deaths, I found myself with few options. And the gray hair," Tate asked gently, "if you don't mind my asking." Sarah touched her temple self-consciously. "It began during Mother's final illness. 3 years ago, I was completely dark-haired. The doctor said severe stress can sometimes cause it. By the time I buried Father, the silver was quite noticeable." "It suits you," Tate said simply. "Distinguishes you. Thomas Fletcher didn't think so." "Thomas Fletcher," Tate said carefully, "is a man who values appearances above substance. He's been looking for a wife like he'd purchase breeding stock, young, fertile, and ornamental." "And what do you look for in a wife, Mr. Forrester?" The question escaped before Sarah could consider its impropriety. Tate regarded her thoughtfully. "Character, intelligence, the kind of strength that doesn't break under pressure." He paused. "The kind of woman who, when life gives her silver hair, wears it proudly instead of hiding it." Their eyes met across the table, and Sarah felt a connection that both thrilled and frightened her. The moment was broken when Harriet Palmer stopped at their table on her way out. "Why, Tate, you didn't mention you were dining here tonight. Father and I would have been delighted to join you." "Private business discussion, Miss Harriet," Tate replied smoothly. "How is the judge this evening?" The older gentleman stepped forward, eyeing Sarah with undisguised curiosity. "Quite well, thank you, Forrester. And who might this lovely lady be?" "Judge Palmer, may I present Miss Sarah Calloway? She's recently arrived from Boston and has taken a position with Widow Johnson at the Mercantile." "Charmed, my dear," the judge said, though his expression suggested he found her employment situation curious. "Boston, you say? What brings you all the way to our little corner of Montana?" Sarah hesitated, unwilling to reveal the humiliating truth. Tate smoothly intervened. Miss Calloway sought new opportunities after family obligations in the East were concluded. Hawthorne is fortunate she chose our town." "Indeed," the judge said, clearly not entirely satisfied with the explanation. "Well, we mustn't interrupt your business discussion. Good evening to you both." As they departed, Harriet cast a final assessing glance at Sarah, her smile tight and calculated. "I seem to have made an enemy," Sarah observed once they were alone again. Tate shrugged. "Harriet considers any unmarried woman under 50 a potential rival. Pay her no mind." "And am I?" Sarah asked boldly. "A rival?" Tate's blue eyes crinkled at the corners. "That would depend on whether you're competing for the same prize, Miss Calloway." The implications of his statement hung between them, charged with potential. Sarah broke the tension by changing the subject. "You mentioned discussing possibilities for my future in Hawthorne. Did you have something specific in mind?" Tate leaned forward, his expression becoming more businesslike. "The schoolteacher position that will open this summer would suit your background perfectly. The town council handles the hiring and Judge Palmer chairs the council." "Ah," Sarah said, understanding. "And after tonight's introduction, I suspect Judge Palmer doesn't view me as an ideal candidate for molding young minds. His opinion can be swayed by the right influences," Tate said confidently. "I happen to know that several prominent ranchers on the council are concerned about the quality of education their children receive. Your Boston credentials would impress them." "Why would you go to such trouble for me?" Sarah asked directly. "You barely know me." Tate considered her question seriously. "Initially, I was annoyed by Fletcher's callous treatment of you. It reflected poorly on all of us in Hawthorne. But now, having spent time in your company—" He paused. "I believe you would be an asset to our community, Miss Calloway. Your intelligence and resilience are qualities we need as the town grows." It was a diplomatic answer, but Sarah sensed there was more he wasn't saying. Nevertheless, she appreciated his practical support. "I would be grateful for any assistance you might provide regarding the teaching position," she said. "In the meantime, I'll endeavor to prove my worth at the Mercantile." They finished their meal with lighter conversation, and Tate escorted Sarah back to the boarding house well before Mrs. Winter's curfew. At the front door, he took her hand gently. "I meant what I said about your silver hair, Miss Calloway. Some men can only see value in what's common. Others recognize that what's rare is often far more precious." His words warmed her more than they should have. "Thank you for a lovely evening, Mr. Forrester." "Tate," he reminded her, "and I hope there will be more evenings to come." As April gave way to May, Sarah settled into life in Hawthorne. Her work at the Mercantile proved satisfying, and Widow Johnson came to rely heavily on her organizational skills and neat handwriting. She made acquaintances at church and gradually began to feel less like an outsider. Tate Forrester became a regular visitor to town, often timing his supply runs to coincide with Sarah's midday break. They would share simple meals at the cafe next to the Mercantile, attracting curious glances and generating whispers that Sarah pretended not to notice. Occasionally, he would invite her to Sunday dinner at his ranch, always ensuring that Miguel and his wife Alina were present as chaperones. The Silver Creek Ranch impressed Sarah with its well-maintained buildings and obvious prosperity. Tate had built the main house himself, he explained, adding rooms as his fortunes improved. Though not grand, it was solidly constructed, with large windows that captured the breathtaking views of distant mountains. "It's beautiful," Sarah said sincerely during her first visit. "You've created something remarkable here." Tate's expression was a mixture of pride and something more vulnerable. "It's meant to be a legacy, something to pass on." "To children," Sarah said, understanding. He nodded. "Someday, the right woman would make this place a home, not just a house." Their eyes met, and the implication was clear. though neither spoke it aloud. Their friendship was evolving into something deeper, but Sarah was cautious. Her experience with Thomas Fletcher had taught her that Western men could have very specific expectations of their wives. In early June, Sarah received word that the school board wished to interview her for the teaching position. Tate had been true to his word, using his influence with the council members who were fellow ranchers. "Judge Palmer still has reservations," he warned her as they walked along the creek that gave his ranch its name. "He's concerned about your circumstances." "My arrival as a mail-order bride, you mean," Sarah said frankly, "or my rejection as one?" "Both. And your connection to me hasn't helped matters." Sarah stopped walking. "Because Harriet Palmer had designs on you," Tate's expression was pained. "Partly. And because Judge Palmer had hopes of joining our properties through marriage. The Palmer Ranch borders my northern pastures. Combined, we'd control the largest cattle operation in the county." "I see." Sarah resumed walking, troubled by the implications. "Perhaps it would be better if we weren't seen together so frequently. I wouldn't want to jeopardize your standing in the community." Tate caught her arm gently, turning her to face him. "Do you think I give a damn about Palmer's opinion or anyone else's? Sarah, surely you must know by now how I feel about you." Her heart raced at the intensity in his blue eyes. "Tate, I've watched you these past 2 months," he continued. "Seen how you've refused to let Fletcher's rejection defeat you. How you've built a place for yourself through hard work and dignity. How you face each day with courage." He took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Sarah Calloway. Your silver hair was what first caught my eye, but it's your spirit that's captured my heart." The declaration left Sarah speechless. She had hoped, suspected, but hearing the words aloud made them real in a way that terrified and exhilarated her. "You don't have to say anything now," Tate said, correctly interpreting her silence. "But know this, I'm not ashamed to be associated with you. Quite the opposite. I'm proud to walk beside a woman of your quality." Sarah found her voice at last. "I care for you deeply, Tate. But I need to establish myself here, prove my worth independently. Can you understand that?" He nodded, his expression softening. "I admire it. Take all the time you need. I'll be here." The school board interview took place the following week in the church meeting room. 5 members questioned Sarah about her educational background, teaching philosophy, and moral character. Judge Palmer's inquiries were particularly pointed. "Miss Calloway, how do you explain to the children of this community that you came west as a mail-order bride?" he asked bluntly. "Hardly the example of traditional courtship we wish to set for impressionable young minds." Sarah sat straighter. "I would explain that life sometimes presents limited choices, Judge Palmer, and that there is dignity in facing difficult circumstances with integrity." "That lesson seems as valuable as any arithmetic or geography I might teach." Several board members nodded approvingly. Judge Palmer, however, remained stone-faced. "And your friendship with Mr. Forrester. There has been talk." "Mr. Forrester has been kind to a newcomer, as have many in Hawthorne," Sarah replied evenly. "If you're asking whether our association is improper, I can assure you it is not. My conduct has been beyond reproach, as Mrs. Winters can attest." The vote was 3-2 in Sarah's favor, with Judge Palmer and 1 other member opposed. She would begin teaching when the current schoolteacher's confinement started in July, with the position becoming permanent if her performance proved satisfactory. The news spread quickly through town. Most reactions were positive, though Sarah noticed some mothers eyeing her speculatively when she entered the mercantile. Widow Johnson was supportive but practical. "Teaching pays better than clerking," she acknowledged. "But I'll be sorry to lose you. You've been a godsend these past months." "I'll help you find a replacement," Sarah promised, "and train them before I leave." That Sunday, Sarah attended services as usual, sitting with Mrs. Winters and the other boarders. After the benediction, congregants gathered on the church lawn to socialize. Sarah found herself approached by several parents, some curious and others openly welcoming. The pleasant exchanges were interrupted by Harriet Palmer's artificially bright voice. "Miss Calloway, congratulations on your new position. Father says you were most persuasive during your interview." "Thank you, Miss Palmer," Sarah replied cautiously. "I look forward to serving the community." "Yes, our little community seems to have quite captivated you," Harriet continued, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Or perhaps it's one particular member who holds your interest." Mr. Forrester has certainly been attentive. A small circle had gathered around them, listening with undisguised interest. Sarah was acutely aware that her response would circulate through town by supper time. "Mr. Forrester has shown me the same neighborly kindness that many in Hawthorne have extended," she said carefully. "It speaks well of the town's character." "Neighborly kindness," Harriet repeated with a brittle laugh. "Is that what you call it? Everyone knows you came here to marry Thomas Fletcher, who rejected you because of your prematurely gray hair. And now you've set your cap for the most eligible bachelor in the county." A shocked murmur ran through the onlookers. Sarah felt heat rising to her face, more from anger than embarrassment. "Miss Palmer," she said quietly but firmly, "you are entitled to your opinion, however ill-informed it may be, but I would caution you against making false accusations about my character or intentions." "False?" Harriet's voice rose slightly. "The entire town knows you're a rejected mail-order bride. You arrived on the afternoon train in April, and by evening Fletcher had washed his hands of you." Before Sarah could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Miss Palmer." Tate Forrester stood at the edge of the circle, his expression thunderous. He moved to Sarah's side, not touching her but positioning himself protectively. "Thomas Fletcher is a fool who couldn't recognize quality when it was standing right in front of him," Tate continued, his voice carrying clearly to all listeners. "Miss Calloway has earned the respect of this community through her own merits. Anyone suggesting otherwise is either misinformed or malicious." Judge Palmer pushed through the crowd. "Forrester, I suggest you moderate your tone when addressing my daughter." "And I suggest, Judge, that you counsel your daughter on the Christian virtues of charity and truthfulness," Tate replied evenly. "If you'll excuse us." He offered his arm to Sarah, who took it gratefully, allowing him to escort her away from the increasingly uncomfortable scene. "Thank you," she said once they were out of earshot, "though I fear your intervention may have made matters worse." "It needed saying," Tate replied, still visibly angry. "Harriet Palmer has been spreading poison about you for weeks. Most folks have the sense to ignore it, but some don't." They walked in silence for a few moments before Sarah spoke again. "Perhaps Thomas Fletcher did me a favor after all. His rejection led me here to this moment." Tate's expression softened as he looked down at her. "To us." "Is there an us, Tate?" Sarah asked, "with all this controversy?" In answer, he stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "There is if you want there to be. I meant what I said that day by the creek, Sarah. I love you. Your silver hair, your courage, your mind, everything about you. I don't give a damn what Harriet Palmer or anyone else thinks." Sarah took a deep breath. "When I came to Montana, I thought I was at the end of my journey. Instead, it was just beginning." She reached up to touch his cheek gently. "I love you too, Tate. I think I have almost from the first moment you told me silver was more valuable than gold." His smile was brilliant as he took her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Have dinner with me tonight at the ranch. Alina's making her special chicken dish." "Yes," Sarah said simply. "Yes to dinner. Yes to us." News of their courtship became official after that Sunday, generating predictable reactions throughout Hawthorne. Some, like Widow Johnson and Mrs. Winters, expressed wholehearted approval. Others, particularly those in Judge Palmer's circle, were notably cool. Thomas Fletcher, when encountered in town, studiously avoided Sarah's gaze, though she occasionally caught him looking at her and Tate with an expression that might have been regret. July brought sweltering heat, and Sarah's first day as Hawthorne's school teacher. The one-room schoolhouse on the edge of town was basic, but well-maintained, with desks for 25 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Teaching proved both challenging and rewarding. Some of the older boys initially tested her authority, but Sarah's firm yet fair approach soon won their respect. The younger children took to her immediately, especially when she introduced songs and games she had used with her charges in Boston. By August, Sarah had established herself as a respected educator in Hawthorne. Parents commented on their children's improved reading skills and newfound enthusiasm for learning. Even Judge Palmer grudgingly acknowledged her competence when his grandson began bringing home increasingly advanced mathematics work. Tate courted her properly throughout the summer, calling at the boarding house on Wednesday evenings and Sunday afternoons, bringing small gifts, wildflowers, a book of poetry, once a beautiful silver hair comb that matched the strands at her temples. "It reminded me of you," he said as she admired it. "Beautiful, unique, precious." On a golden evening in late September, Tate invited Sarah for a special dinner at Silver Creek Ranch. When he collected her from the boarding house, he seemed unusually nervous, checking his pocket several times during the buggy ride to the ranch. The house had been transformed. Lanterns illuminated the front porch, and inside, the dining table was set with fine china and silver that Tate admitted had belonged to his mother. "Elena outdid herself," Sarah said appreciatively as they enjoyed a meal of roast venison, fresh vegetables from the kitchen garden, and apple pie for dessert. "She wanted everything to be perfect," Tate said, refilling Sarah's water glass. "Tonight's special." After dinner, he suggested a walk to watch the sunset. They strolled hand in hand to a rise overlooking the ranch, where Tate had placed a bench facing west. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink as the sun sank toward the distant mountains. "Beautiful," Sarah murmured. "Yes, you are," Tate replied, his voice husky with emotion. He took both her hands in his, turning to face her fully. "Sarah Calloway, I never expected to find someone like you in Hawthorne. You came here searching for a husband and found rejection instead. I thank God every day for Thomas Fletcher's blindness, because it gave me the chance to see what he couldn't." Sarah's heart began to race as Tate continued. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought laughter and light into my days, given me someone to share my dreams with." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I'm asking you to share not just dreams but a life, to build something lasting together." He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring with a small but flawless diamond. "Will you marry me, Sarah? Make Silver Creek Ranch your home. Make me the happiest man in Montana territory." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Tate, with all my heart, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then gathered her into his arms for a tender kiss that spoke of promises and tomorrows. They were married on a crisp October day in 1883, with golden leaves drifting from the cottonwoods that lined Hawthorne's Main Street. The church was filled to capacity not just with Tate's friends and business associates, but with Sarah's students and their families, Widow Johnson, Mrs. Winters and her boarders, and even several of Tate's ranch hands who had polished their boots for the occasion. Thomas Fletcher did not attend, having left town on business the previous week. Judge Palmer came, though Harriet was conspicuously absent. Most surprisingly, a telegram arrived from Boston that morning. Sarah had written to her father's former colleagues about her new life, and they sent their congratulations and good wishes. Sarah wore a gown of ivory silk that Alina had helped her sew, with the silver hair comb securing her veil. As she walked down the aisle toward Tate, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a window, the silver strands in her dark hair catching the light from the stained glass. What had once been a source of shame now seemed like a badge of honor, a symbol of the journey that had brought her to this moment. Reverend Thompson spoke of love's endurance through trials and of building foundations on mutual respect. When Tate and Sarah exchanged vows, his voice rang with certainty and hers with quiet joy. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend proclaimed to enthusiastic applause from the congregation. The reception at the hotel was a blend of frontier practicality and Eastern refinement, Sarah's influence evident in the floral arrangements and table settings, while the abundant food and lively fiddle music reflected Tate's Western sensibilities. As they circulated among their guests, Sarah was startled when Judge Palmer approached them, glass in hand. "Mrs. Forrester," he said formally, "I believe I owe you an apology." Sarah exchanged a surprised glance with Tate before responding. "Sir, I misjudged you," the judge continued. "Your conduct as our schoolteacher has been exemplary, and the children have progressed remarkably under your guidance. Forrester is fortunate to have found a woman of your caliber." "Thank you, Judge," Sarah said sincerely. "That means a great deal to me." The judge cleared his throat awkwardly. "I hope you'll continue teaching, at least until a suitable replacement can be found." "We've discussed it," Tate interjected. "Sarah will finish the school year. After that, we'll see." After the judge moved on, Sarah squeezed Tate's hand. "Wonders never cease." "He's a reasonable man beneath the bluster," Tate said. "Unlike his daughter, who I noticed didn't have the grace to attend." "Her absence is a gift in itself," Sarah replied with a smile. "Now, I believe your ranch hands are waiting to toast their boss and his new wife." The sun was setting as they departed the reception in Tate's buggy, now decorated with ribbons and tin cans that clattered behind them. Sarah leaned against her husband's shoulder, watching the town of Hawthorne recede as they headed toward Silver Creek Ranch toward home. "Happy, Mrs. Forrester?" Tate asked, dropping a kiss on her temple where the silver strands caught the last rays of sunlight. "Completely," Sarah replied. "Who would have thought that being rejected for my gray hair would lead to the greatest happiness of my life?" Tate's arm tightened around her. "Silver's always been more valuable than gold in these parts, my love. Some men just don't know how to recognize true treasure when they see it." As the buggy crested the rise that overlooked Silver Creek Ranch, Sarah caught her breath at the sight of lanterns illuminating the path to the house, where Alina and Miguel waited to welcome them home. Home, not just a place, but a feeling of belonging, of being valued for exactly who she was. "Thomas Fletcher's loss is my infinite gain," Tate murmured, helping her from the buggy with tender hands. That night, as moonlight silvered the bedroom they now shared, Sarah found herself cherished in ways she had never imagined possible. Tate's love transformed her final insecurities into confidence, his gentle passion awakening her own. "I love you," he whispered in the darkness. "Every strand of silver, every hidden thought, every dream you carry." "And I love you," she replied, "for seeing value where others saw only flaws." The years that followed brought changes to Silver Creek Ranch and to Hawthorne itself. Sarah finished the school year as promised, then reluctantly resigned when the signs of her first pregnancy became evident in the spring of 1884. The town council presented her with a leather-bound volume of Emerson's essays, inscribed with their appreciation, and her students created handmade cards that she treasured. Their son, James, was born in November 1884, with his father's blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair that both parents scrutinized anxiously for signs of silver. Tate laughed at himself when he realized what they were doing. "Poor child will be gray soon enough with us for parents," he joked, cradling his newborn son with wonder. Sarah recovered quickly from the birth, thriving in her roles as mother and rancher's wife. She started a small library in one corner of the parlor, ordering books from Chicago and Boston to share with neighboring families. Twice a month, children from surrounding ranches gathered at Silver Creek for Story Day, an informal continuation of Sarah's teaching career. Thomas Fletcher eventually sold his ranch and moved to California, reportedly having found a much younger bride there, who soon presented him with twin daughters. When Sarah heard the news, she sent a silver spoon for each child with a note of congratulations. She never received a reply, but the gesture gave her a sense of closure. Harriet Palmer eventually married a widower from Helena with political ambitions. Judge Palmer retired from the bench and moved to be near them, selling his ranch to Tate at a fair price. The acquisition expanded Silver Creek's holdings considerably, securing the Forresters' position as one of the most prosperous families in the county. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined the family in 1886, followed by another son, William, in 1889. The house expanded along with the family, Tate adding a nursery wing and later a dedicated schoolroom where Sarah taught their children, and occasionally those of the ranch hands. By 1893, 10 years after Sarah had stepped off the train in Hawthorne, Silver Creek Ranch was known throughout Montana Territory for its quality cattle, innovative farming methods, and generous hospitality. The silver in Sarah's hair had spread, creating a striking streak that framed her face. Tate's temples had silvered to match, and he often joked that they were becoming a matched set. On their 10th anniversary, Tate presented Sarah with a silver locket containing miniature portraits of their 3 children. "10 years ago, you thought your life was ending when Fletcher rejected you," he said as they sat on their favorite bench watching the sunset. "Instead, it was just beginning." "The best kind of beginning," Sarah agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "One that leads to this a life richer than I ever dared dream." Tate took her hand, the same strong, gentle grip that had steadied her that first day on the train platform. "When I said silver was more valuable than gold, I had no idea how right I was." Sarah smiled up at the man who had seen beyond the surface to the woman beneath. "Thank goodness for my premature gray hair. It led me to true love. And thank goodness for Thomas Fletcher's poor judgment," Tate added with a grin. "Without it, I might never have found the silver treasure that became the heart of Silver Creek Ranch." As they walked hand in hand back toward the house where their children waited, Sarah reflected that sometimes life's greatest disappointments truly were blessings in disguise. Her journey west had begun with rejection, but led to acceptance more profound than she could have imagined, a love that valued her completely, silver hair and all.